Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believing a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From the City of Angels in Los Angeles, welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver at caregiverdave.com, along with my lovely co-host Carletta Cole at caregiversafeplace.com. And we're also coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio and podcast networks on 26 global audio and video platforms, including iHeartRadio and iTunes and YouTube, Spreaker, SoundCloud. The list goes on and on. In fact, we're proud to be voted number one caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM and number 2 on FeedSpot out of the top 60 and number 2 on caringvillage.com. And we have an especially exciting show planned for you today. Nancy Perpall was a critical care nurse before she entered law school in her 30s to become a highly regarded divorce attorney. As a nurse, she cared for those with physical problems, and as a divorce attorney, she helped her clients with the emotional issues that come with ending a relationship they thought would last forever. Yeah. Shortly after we retired, my husband had a stroke and was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Oh no. I've been his caregiver ever since and know firsthand the struggles a caregiver faces, regardless of how much they love the person they're caring for. Well, we have something in common. Both our spouses had a stroke. But before we get started, I want to take this moment to thank last week's guest, Dr. Christine Van Horn, an author, teacher, speaker, and a certified emergency manager for 30 years and retired recently. And just a reminder, you can watch or listen to that interview and all our interviews on our membership website, caregiverdave.com, or any of our other 26 global networks that I mentioned earlier. Okay, enough of that. Nancy, so great to have you on the Caregiver Dave Show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, and I always like to ask my guests, just who is Nancy Perpall? And why was she placed on this earth?
I am a nurturer by birth, I think. I'm the middle of 7 children.
Wow.
And I always took care of everybody's injuries, including the various animals that we had.
Wow.
And my father was diagnosed with cancer 2 weeks before Christmas in 1963. And I was the one who my father wanted to go to the hospital so that my mother wouldn't be alone driving home at night. So I sat on this wooden bench outside the nurse's station. In those days, they didn't have intensive care. It was just the sickest patients were closest to the nurse's station. So he was in the hospital for 3 months. And for 3 months, I ran around the hospital in my little Catholic school uniform, delivering blood to the emergency room, picking up things from the pharmacy, delivering them to different wards. Can you imagine today? I mean, can you even imagine?
Well, they've got a host of volunteers at hospitals now.
Well, yeah, but they don't allow them to do the things I did.
Right.
But, I just admired those nurses so much that I really, I wanted to go into nursing. And so that's what I did. And then I wrote a textbook with some people from University of Pennsylvania, Advanced Concepts in Clinical Nursing. And it was adopted by many nursing schools nationally. And many hospitals incorporated many of the procedures and the protocols that we wrote out in this book to increase better patient outcomes. But the hospital that I was working at the time, and I was in the emergency room at the time, they weren't going to adopt any of these protocols because I was a nurse, and the protocols and procedures are all they're all promulgated by a doctor. So
familiarity breeds contempt.
So to make a long story short, I approached a new hire in the hospital who was a lawyer, but she had been a nurse. And I asked her, what can I do to get the administration to adopt some of these procedures? Because other hospitals are seeing that you're getting a better outcome for the patients. And she looked at me and she said, become a lawyer. You'll have power. They'll listen to you. So
did she say become a divorce lawyer?
No, that's a different story. That's a different story if you want to hear it. I was hired to do
sure, why not?
practice. And so I went to this firm, and the first day on the job, there were 75 files piled on my desk that were divorce files.
Wow.
And I went to the senior manager, the managing partner, and I said, I wasn't hired to do divorce. I don't want to do divorce. I'm going through a divorce myself. I mean, I have no interest in the subject. And he leaned across the desk and pointed an inch from my nose and said, you're not going to make it here. You do what we tell you to do. Well, as I said, I'm the middle of 7 children. And when you tell me I can't do something, that's when I dig in and I do it.
Wow.
So a couple of years later, I had a very, very, very evolving and very high asset divorce clientele. And the firm lost the contract with the insurance company to represent the physicians. So I took my files that my clients said I could take, and I opened my own practice. And 32 years later, I retired.
Wow.
Wow.
And now I'm a caregiver for my husband.
You're a real overachiever, aren't you?
Well,
it's hard enough becoming a nurse, but a nurse and an attorney. I mean, who does that?
I don't know. I don't think I'm an overachiever. I think if I were a man, people would think it was maybe, he wanted to make more money or whatever. But I don't know. I don't think I'm an overachiever. But I will tell you that sitting outside of the physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and David, you can probably identify with all this. As my husband recovered from his stroke and I put him in aromatherapy, I started to write a novel that I always wanted to write about relationships. And I wanted to write this novel to help people see what you shouldn't do, why you shouldn't get married. Right. And when you have these doubts, it's time to break off the engagement and not go through with the service or the ceremony. So I did write that book, and it's getting good reviews on Amazon. I'm thrilled about that. So it's called Around Which All Things Bend, which of course is love, right? And every caregiver knows that. Every caregiver knows that you have to bend and bend and bend.
Yes. You do.
So yeah, you're not an overachiever. You're a nurse, a lawyer, a textbook writer,
a novelist,
adopt your stuff, and a novelist. And I'm sure there's more that you haven't told us, right?
We all have our breaking points, no matter how much we love somebody. And I think, it's so important for caregivers to understand that when you start to feel anxious and resentment a little bit because the care you're giving is not really appreciated, or you feel it's not appreciated. And it's not because they don't appreciate it necessarily. It's because they don't cognitively understand everything that you're giving up. So
they're just trying to survive.
Right.
How's your husband today?
He's doing fairly well. He's recovered from the stroke. He still has some sequelae from the stroke, a lot of emotionality. Cognitively, he was an extremely educated and very, very high functioning man. But,
did it affect his speech today?
His speech, he struggles at times for words, but the aphasia is pretty much, it's as good as it's ever going to get. He does very well. But,
so what type of Parkinson's does he have?
He has, I'm glad you asked that, because this really still sticks in my craw here. He has the kind of Parkinson's, it's called autonomic nervous system failure. And it's a rare type of Parkinson's. We moved from where we had retired, Kiowa Island, South Carolina, to Atlanta, Georgia, for his medical care. And they have a world-renowned Parkinson's clinic there.
Wow.
And the chief neurologist told us that they're seeing more and more men my husband's age. He was in the Navy for 3 years, and he was on a ship, not constantly, but he was off and on and off and on. And he was a hard hat diver in the Navy. So he was on the kind of ships that would go and tender and service the other ships, while they're still out at sea. And the neurologist said that they really feel that this uptick in veterans, particularly Navy veterans, has to do with all the asbestos that was on the ship, and that Parkinson's can be a very environmentally induced illness. But the VA says, no, absolutely not.
Of course, because they don't want to take any blame for it, whatever. My mom has supranuclear palsy, which is called, it's PSP.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another form of the neurological part that causes dementia. So that's why I asked, because that's common for them to have strokes as well.
Well, he's, I would say he's starting with a little dementia. He doesn't remember things, and
They usually go hand in hand.
yeah. So but you know what? Life is good. I still have him.
It's a new normal.
Exactly.
Right.
So there are many things you could tell us about caregiving. What would you say is the most important one? Would it be self-care of all the things that you could say?
I personally think as a caregiver, the most important thing is to be a medical advocate for the person that you're caring for. When my husband had his stroke, I still have my blood pressure cuff and stethoscope from 50 years ago. And I took his blood pressure, and it was 52/34. And his pulse was 39.
Was it a bleed or a clot?
No, it was ischemia. The blood wasn't circulating to his, he had a midbrain stroke, which very few people survive. Very few people survive a midbrain. That's a killer. If you have a midbrain stroke, that's all she wrote, usually.
So because of a blood clot?
No, ischemia. There was no blood going to that part of the brain, and it just dies.
And why was that?
Because his blood pressure and his pulse. His pulse was 39. He was barely perfusing his heart. And when you have a situation like that, the blood is diverted. The body is such an amazing organism. The blood is shunted to the brain and the heart and the kidney. But because of, gravity, and because of how big he is, he's 6'2", was shunting to his kidneys and his heart, but not everything was going up to the brain. But in any event, I say that you need to be a medical advocate for them, because when he was admitted to the hospital in Charleston, which is where we retired to, I asked for a cardiac consult. And this very attractive resident, well, actually, I guess he had just become he'd graduated his residency. He was a full-fledged doctor, but he was a hospitalist. That's what they call him now. And I asked for a cardiac consult, and in his fine Southern accent, he said, "Ma'am, if you're going to want a cardiac consult, well, you're going to have to wait until he's discharged. I'm here to evaluate his neurological status." And I said, "Doctor, I used to do defense malpractice. And if anything happens to that man, guess who I'm coming after?" 2 days later, he had a pacemaker inserted.
Oh, wow.
But it never really got much better after that. I mean, I really, and he will tell you this if he were here, he would tell you, I saved his life on 3 occasions in Charleston. I mean, it was, Charleston is fabulous. Don't misunderstand.
it's very charming, but their medical system is horrible. Yeah.
Yes. So does he have
bad.
any regrets that you saved his life? You know, there are certain things worse than death, quality of life,
No, he has
etc.
no regrets. No, he's he's such an optimistic person. He's just he exudes caring about other people. And even though, he struggles at times, if he sees somebody at the gym who's worse than he is, he'll go over and talk to them. I mean, he's just such a good person. I mean, no, he enjoys life. I mean,
So what wakes him up in the morning? What is his goal for living these days?
I think, honestly, he doesn't want to leave me.
And your excellent care.
Yes, well, we have fun. We still have fun.
You have grandchildren, I assume.
Yes, but this is not our first marriage, so we have a blended family,
Okay.
and we have 10 between us. I have 5, and he has 5, and
you have little ones running around.
well, no, actually, they're all pretty much grown up. My oldest granddaughter was just accepted at Auburn, and she wants to do industrial engineering.
So no great grandchildren yet.
Not great. Oh no, I don't want. I'm not ready for great.
Oh, they're coming, whether you like it or not.
Oh yeah. Well, in any event, no. And he takes great joy in his grandchildren, and I do as well. So, no, I mean, life is good. We have each other. We have fun. We really do.
So when should
we inject a lot of humor in our day.
When should a caregiver acknowledge that they need a break, which is, kind of what we do?
Well, I
have
tell
you had a lot of breaks in your caregiving career?
Not enough of them. I'll be honest with you. I think when you really start to think to yourself, and mind you, I was critical care, which means I had double specialty for the emergency room and intensive care. If they needed me in intensive care, I got pulled from the ER and I went to the intensive care. If they needed me in intensive care, emergency room, I went back to the emergency room. So I have a lot of skills. I still have them after all these years. And nurses who trained in my era, we're still nurses, no matter what other professions we might go into. But sometimes I just think I can't keep, maybe we should go to an assisted living, maybe,
what stops you?
What stops me? We've been to 3 of them.
You couldn't find one that is attractive for you?
Well, we found a couple. We found 2 that were possibilities, but the people who, the clients who were there, they call them guests. They were far worse than my husband.
Are they older as well?
Oh my goodness, yeah. They're in their 70s and 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And
and sometimes that does not do good for someone's quality of life.
They like to be around young people,
You have to be around people like-minded and vibrant, and that enjoy doing the things that you like to do in life, in order for you to be able to feed off that great energy, and allow yourself to be healed. Other than that, then it's more of a depressing state, which declines your mental and also declines your will to live.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I found it depressing, honestly.
Yeah, my wife also did not want to hang around older people, even support groups, because she was a very young person who had a stroke. She was 52. And, these people in the groups are like 80. And they're like, 1 foot in the grave. And she just says, I'm not going to that. Well,
has she recovered?
Well, she still cannot speak in sentences, but she can communicate very well with charades and Pictionary.
When I tell you, her communication is better than someone talking.
That's true. That's true. Her communication is as good as my dog's communication, who tells me every need he has,
without saying anything.
Yes. and she still cannot walk. She's paralyzed on one side, but she has a power chair. We traveled the world. I mean, do you have an opportunity to travel a lot? Can he travel? Does he like to travel?
He can't really travel. We did
Yeah.
recently take a trip because I had a book signing in Pennsylvania. And he's heat intolerant. And the autonomic nervous system failure causes him to be really overwhelmed if he gets too hot. And he almost had a panic attack on the plane, both going there and coming back.
So he's very comfortable at home.
He's very comfortable at home. And
how often can you get away and leave him with adequate care? You have a lot of volunteers who, maybe some of the kids.
well, only my son lives near us, and he's very good and he helps. I mean, I can leave him. He's not at the stage where he can't be by himself. So I can leave him, but I don't leave him for long periods of time.
What's the maximum number of days that you feel comfortable leaving him?
The maximum number of days?
Yeah, like 1 week. Is that too long?
That's too long. I'd say 1 day.
1 day.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
that's tough.
So you really don't get a break at all.
You need a break.
Well, we just moved here. We've been here 2 years, and COVID, we moved in the middle of COVID. So, we're just now actually making friends. We're going out to dinner with some friends on Saturday night. I belong to a book club. I belong to a couple of other women's groups. Women's lunches and that type of things. And, I'm also promoting my book, and I do a lot of podcasts to promote my book. And that's a great diversion for me. And honestly, writing the book was my escape.
Yeah.
That was that was the world I lived in my head.
So just curious, because you're a classic caregiver who feels like they can't get away for more than a day. And I want to ask you, why is that? Is there no one who can offer the care that you have? Because I tell caregivers all the time, yes, you're an excellent caregiver. Yes, he only wants care from you. Yes, you might even be a perfectionist in your care. Being a nurse, I would understand that. But adequate care would be good enough, because that way you get away, right? Because 30% of caregivers die before their loved ones do. And he will appreciate you more when you get back, because, he's accepting adequate care versus excellent care. So what I just said, do you have a problem with? Just curious.
I don't dispute anything that you said. In fact, I am planning a book signing where I am going to probably be away for like 2 weeks this summer.
Okay, great.
And I think he's going to probably go up to his daughter's in North Carolina.
Okay.
And,
well, you made a way, didn't you? Good for you.
Well, as I said, it may sound like an excuse, but COVID has really been an issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, with his complications, if he gets COVID,
sure.
I just shudder to think. In fact, he had a very minor case, even though we're, vaccinated, double boosted, and he was in bed for 8 days.
Wow.
I mean, breakfast,
just from the vaccination and booster?
No, from COVID.
So he got it anyway.
Yes, he got it anyway. And it just, so, subsequent to that, and that was in January, we've been very, very careful. I don't know where he could have gotten it, because, he masks up.
It doesn't matter. You can touch something. It could be on your clothes. It's, you never know.
Well, how effective are masks? Even most masks are not N95, and even an N95, there's a 5% chance that it's going to get through.
Yeah.
Well, so I know, and that's a struggle. That was a struggle, but I agree with you. I need to promote my book, and I need to do something other than be in the house and worry about it.
As long as you agree with me and you take my advice.
Yes.
Because a lot of caregivers agree with me, but they don't take my advice.
Well, I am actually taking your advice. I know that I needed a break. I know I need a break. I need to
You really do. And you won't realize how much you need a break until you're taking the break. And then you say,
Right.
wow, this, I don't know why I didn't do this. I've got to do this again regularly. And
That is exactly like a lot of the reason why, like with my foundation, people don't even know that they're caregivers. You know, a lot of them don't know. They just feel like I'm taking care of my husband, I'm taking care of my wife, I'm taking care of my kids. You know, they have a disability, so you know, I don't need to get away from them. And once I give them the day out, or I do something to make sure that they have a self-care day, they don't realize how much they have missed, you know, until they get out and they're like, whoa, this is what I've been missing, you know. So believe me, once you get away and, you know, even if it's for 5 minutes, you know, it makes you feel so much better.
yeah.
Well, I do regularly get facials and massages.
Well, that's
Oh,
good.
well, good.
That's better than nothing. Yes. Some
That
people we
is
can't
great.
even get to go get a Starbucks or to go get, you know, a lunch with a friend or a massage or something, you know, or get
Yeah.
their nails done. So
Oh, I get my
Right.
nails done too.
good for you. So in the last 5 minutes of the show, why don't you tell us something that we didn't cover that you want to make sure we cover, and then how to get a hold of you or buy your book, etc. Is it a self-published or you have a publisher?
It's a hybrid. It's an imprint from Simon and Schuster.
Oh,
You know, you
Yeah.
front the money. It's not a traditionally
Sure.
published book, but you know, I'm not sure I would really recommend them to anyone, but you
I haven't
know,
found a great way to publish a book these days, even with the hybrids and you know, basically you've got to do all the work, regardless of
well, that's what I'm finding. I mean, I'm finding you have to do all of the advertising, the social media, which is not my forte. I
Right.
really am not wild about social media, but there's no other venue that, you know, you've got to get out there and do TikTok of
Can-
all things.
Can you get yourself on television, or you don't know?
Oh, actually, I have been on television. I'm going to be on television again this week. I was on television, of all places, in Indianapolis, Indiana, on Wish TV. And my first husband went to Vietnam. When he came back, he was accepted with an MBA program at Purdue, which is in Lafayette, Indiana.
Uh-huh.
And I was the emergency room nurse, 3 to 11 or 11 to 7. And it was myself and aide and an orderly. And if anything really bad came in, you called any doctor in a house who happened to be an OBGYN because he was always there. So fortunately, he had actually been to Vietnam, you know, earlier and really knew how to deal with trauma. So that was interesting when I went back to India, you know, when I went on this TV program.
How did you get it?
I went to a program, it's called the National Publicity Summit.
Oh,
And
that's how we
yeah.
met, isn't it?
Right.
Okay.
It's Steve Harrison's.
Yes.
And you know, I may be on the Today Show and also a TV
Oh, good. Today's
program.
show seemed interested.
But I'm on a Limelight TV tomorrow, which just features books
Yeah.
and authors. And I was thrilled that they picked my book. So
Good. How many did you book at the National Publicity Summit?
I've done 15.
Good for you.
This is the 16th, and I have 20
Good for you.
out to the
Yeah, my wife and I did that too. We flew. This was when we had to fly to New York, and we spent 3 grueling days of pitching 88 producers. And they just loved her. She was a great prop for me because they would come over and just start talking to her, having a conversation, not realizing that she can't talk. But we 44 of them, about half of them actually booked us. And so we did very well. Now we're a producer, having people pitch to us.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you know, I think podcasts, I've always listened to podcasts.
They're great because their audience are trapped in a car in rush hour traffic, and they're not going anywhere versus a 3 or 4 minute segment on NBC, you know?
Well, interesting you raise that because a producer who is in Los Angeles contacted their go-between And I have an interview with them December 20th
Oh,
because they heard me on a podcast and they're interested in and read my book
yeah.
and are interested.
Who is that?
I don't think I should say.
Okay.
It's a well-known producer. I
Well,
think
good
they're
for you.
interested.
You're doing
Yeah.
great. You have a great story. So,
Well,
how do we get a hold of your book?
My book is Around Which All Things Bend. And as I said, that's love. How far will you bend to get love and give love until you break? And it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and wherever books are sold. I have a website, which I wrote a care article, which it was Eye Pain Magazine. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
They asked me to write an article. They publish the magazine. It's international magazine twice a year. And I wrote an article about caregiving.
Okay.
And
Through
so
the National Publicity Summit, you met them?
I met them at the National Publicity Summit. And I think they invited a few people to send their articles in, but they selected mine, which I was thrilled about.
Right.
And so my website is Nancy Perpall, spelled P as in Peter, E-R, P as in Peter, ALL.com. And I have a lot of blogs on there that I'm getting such a tremendous feedback on the series that I did about the malnourished marriage and 5 essential emotional nutrients. I'm turning that into a book. And that book will be out next year. And yeah, I guess I am an overachiever. You're right.
And you should definitely look into TED Talks, you know. I know the summit used to have a guy from Wilmington, but he's not there anymore. But you need to just call TED Talk. They'd be happy to have you speak. And that has a lot of prestige for some reason.
You know, I've never thought about that, but if you have enough confidence in the fact that they
Well,
would
I
be...
did mine and it's had like 20,000, 15,000 views.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They don't allow it on your YouTube page. It's only on theirs. And
wow.
So, yeah, look it up. Caregiver
I will.
Dave,
That's fabulous. That's what was your wife with you?
No, she didn't want to fly to Wilmington, Delaware. So I was like, she only goes to the fun places, Hawaii, you know.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, it's been a joy having you on. I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, well, I'm so appreciative. You know, I think we hit a snag when I was supposed to be on before, but thank you for forgiving the snag. And
hey, I've made
as a true
mistakes
caregiver,
too.
you would, of course.
It's common. I've made them myself as a guest. You know, I've got so much going on and I forget. So anyway, remember that all our live shows become recorded pod and video casts on all your favorite platforms. My #1 newly released book, Secrets from the Hammock, Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times, is changing lives all over the world, available wherever books are sold, and also on my free membership website, caregiverdave.com. And join my caregiver Facebook community of 34,000 caregivers on Facebook. And you'll learn all about our new Acapulco Villa Caregiver Wellness Vacation I'm offering to burned out caregivers to keep as many of those 30% of caregivers who die before their loved ones alive. Go ahead and tell them briefly what you do, Carletta.
Well, you can follow me on Caregiver Safe Place on Facebook, Instagram. I am a caregiver respite donation person for family caregivers.
Yeah. And if you click the like or follow button on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this interview on, it helps us reach even more caregivers by improving Google search engine algorithms. So thank you all, my listeners out there all over the world, for tuning in every Wednesday and making us the #1 caregiver podcast on the internet. So until next week, same time, same channel, may God richly bless you all. Bye-bye. Anytime we suffer loss, we grieve. And a lot of people don't realize what even the grief process is. But it could be 5 to 7 steps ranging from denial, I don't believe this is happening, anger, oh my gosh, I'm so upset this is happening, to a form of bargaining, how can I get out of this, to depression, which is a very serious thing because that often leads to suicide. And then finally, after you realize you have no more control over your situation and you're totally okay with the new normal that it brings, that wonderful, wonderful place called acceptance.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again.